More pedestrians died in Alabama last year than at any time since 1981. After 2 more died this week here in southeast Alabama, there is a stern warning from state troopers tonight. Be careful. Here's News 4's Jacqueline Lambert with the concerning numbers.
A 56% increase in pedestrian fatalities over the past 10 years is nothing to take lightly.
Oftentimes, people don't necessarily think about pedestrian safety.
Last year, 125 died, which is why state troopers are hoping people will think twice when walking along roadways.
What we've seen since post-COVID, and we do believe there may be a nexus there relative to the pedestrian-related fatalities, especially on the county roads, because the people were locked down.
This week, a pedestrian was killed in Enterprise, another along a Geneva County road.
I say have that additional level of situational awareness, be extra cautious. Again, make no assumptions about a motorist being able to see you. In conjunction with motorists, especially if you see a vehicle on the side of the road, anticipate a pedestrian being there.
Burkett claims statistics show pedestrian carelessness is to blame for a majority of those fatalities. Factors such as time of day can contribute to pedestrian accidents.
But you really have to understand truly how dangerous it is to get out, just like I said, during those low light hours or at nighttime, especially if you don't have some type of reflective material on your person, on your body.
Another factor is people stepping out of their cars. Best advice is to pull into a safe parking lot or another safe area. In Dothan, I'm Jacqueline Lambert for your Hometown News Leader.
Troopers believe increased awareness will lower pedestrian deaths.